All right, looks like we're live. So I'm assuming the tweet's going out right now to everybody. So people will start to file in here in a minute or so. I'm Jason, and I don't know.
I'm David. Which direction goes here?
Hang on, I'm hearing an echo. I'm not sure where the echo is coming from.
Oh, maybe you have volume on your computer too, or no? I'm not getting an echo.
I'm hearing myself. Let's just test.
Maybe switch back and forth between like the inputs.
Yep. Hang on. Test. See if it works. Okay, I think. No, I'm still hearing myself.
I think this is a good way to start, because every single video chat solution ever, they always have problems when you start out with them, right? I think we tried for I don't know how long, where we would cycle through all 4 of them. Like we'd go through, oh, does it work on Skype right now? Oh, Skype doesn't work. There's an echo or there's lag, and then you'd switch to Google Hangouts. And
I got it fixed. We're good.
Oh, you got it fixed.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry for that. A technical difficulty there. But anyway, welcome to this. We're going to go for like an hour or more, or however long it takes, at least an hour, to go through all these questions and talk about these things. So, over the past week, we've been getting a lot of questions about remote working. People are starting to explore this for the first time. Companies are scrambling to figure out what to do. And we've been doing this for 20 years, so we thought that it would be good for us to be here to offer up some advice and help people out with this, because people are struggling. The thing I wanted to start out with, and we're going to get into questions in a second, but I thought I would start by talking a little bit about the opportunity here, actually. As companies struggle to go remote, what ends up happening is companies begin to try to simulate the office remotely, which is not really the right way to do things. Although it's the natural way to do things. It's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of back in the mid 90s when the graphical web browser first hit. Most websites started to look like CD-ROM interfaces and DVD interfaces, because it was basically like a direct port. It's like, we don't know what this new medium is, so we are just going to port this design over from the way we interact with DVDs or CDs onto this other new medium. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening now, or people are struggling with, which is like, they don't know how to work remotely, so they're trying to simulate what it was like to work in the office, which means people are having the same number of meetings, they're just doing this by video instead. Or they're even turning on, I was talking to a journalist yesterday who was telling me about, she's hearing a bunch of companies are turning on like these like perpetual video streams in everyone's computer, where people are able to look at each other all day long while they're working, or taking a picture of people every 10 seconds and whatever. This idea that like you want to try to simulate what it's like being in an office where you can see everybody, so why not see everybody at home? But this is the wrong approach. But it's, again, I understand why people do it. It's comfort. The real opportunity here with remote work is to embrace the advantages of remote work. There's some disadvantages, certainly. And for people who are unfamiliar with this way of working, a lot of things are going to look like disadvantages at the start. No different than if you threw me a trombone and said, go play something, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I would suck at it. And a lot of people are going to suck at remote working for a while. But there are huge advantages to remote working. And one of these is that there's a mindset shift. It's not just about working remotely and trying to simulate what it's like to work locally. It's about actually giving people more time and attention to themselves. It's about being more asynchronous, so not turning everything into a real-time situation. Like, it's really easy to pull people into an office or a conference room at the office, which is why people have meetings all day long. So when you're remote, don't just throw people in a video chat all day long either. Like, how about having fewer of these things and writing things up instead and disseminating information so people can absorb this information on their own schedule? These are some of the ways you can begin to shift the way you work. This is actually an opportunity to rethink the way you work. It's actually like being thrown off course a little bit and having to look around and go, where should we go next? These are these moments that we don't often have, because most companies they're pushed by momentum. They're going to keep working the way they've always worked, and they never have a chance, because everyone's always so super busy, to reconsider the way they work. And this is one of those lucky moments when we get a chance to rethink the way we're working. So a lot of the things we're going to be talking about today are probably going to seem counterintuitive to many. Some of the answers we're going to give are going to seem strange because people are going to say, like, how do you know what people are doing? And the answer is, you don't need to know what people are doing all the time. How do you know if people are working? You don't need to know if people are working. And we'll get into this, I'm sure, as we get into the questions. But this is really, truly an opportunity to rethink the way you work and do some things in a new way that we think actually are going to pan out in a big way for you over the long term. So I wanted to start with that. I'm sure David has some thoughts additionally, and then we'll jump into some questions.
Yeah, I think one of the opportunities here too is to realize that when you switch into this new mode where it's not about getting everyone together at the same time, this is also exactly what we need right now. There's going to be all these other demands on people's time. They're going to need to be, if they have a family, help their family during the day. They're going to need to help their friends. They're going to need to do all these other things where gathering 5 people together at like 10:30. Do you know what? Don't do that much. Do less of that and take the opportunity, as Jason says, to do the status meeting, not as a meeting, but as a write-up. Do the pitch of something you want to do right now. Not as a meeting, as a write-up. There's so many things that people call meetings for, or they force people to be at the same place at the same time for. Just doesn't need to be like that. Now, at the same time, as Jason's saying, like, video chat is good. Right? Why are we doing this right now? Why are we not just writing this up as a bunch of answers? Because this creates a connection. There are definitely times where that's exactly what you want. You just don't need to do that all the time. And so sort of rationing that out and doing it when it matters is the switch to make. But I think we can jump into the questions.
Yeah, the other thing I want to add to that is I was talking to someone this morning about this. One of the questions that this hasn't been asked yet, but one of the questions that comes up is like the social component is lost for people who are used to being in an office. And so one of the suggestions I had was, this is, again, to reiterate the fact that this is a time to do things a little bit differently. If you always have, let's say, a Monday morning stand-up, where everyone's around a room, whatever, substitute that for a Monday morning social. So cut out that Monday morning stand-up business meeting and instead just allow people to talk about what they did last weekend or what they are planning on doing this week. So substitute some of that work for some life but don't try to go business as usual and then also fit that in. Make some sacrifices on the business side, because that meeting that you probably have Monday morning, you probably don't need to actually have that meeting. What's probably more valuable is a social component right now. And then instead of having that meeting, write those things up and disseminate those things so people have the information on their own schedule. So anyway, I'm sure we'll talk about plenty of that, but I think that's another way to think about some of these things is to swap and to shift. So by the way, Andy, who you can't see on screen, is sort of managing this live stream. So he'll be popping questions up and we'll just go ahead and answer those as they come in. So Andy, if you want to throw the first question up, we'll take that. All right, Joe asks, in a workplace with a mix of local and remote workers, what are some good strategies for making remote workers feel more connected and not left out of office events? Well, events, it depends what you'd call an event. Like lunch, can't really do that. After work drinks or get together, can't do that sort of thing. But as far as like...
But also pause. Yeah. You shouldn't be doing any of those things right now.
Right.
Like, even if you have to go to an office, don't go out for drinks. Don't go do any of these things, right? Like, the whole reason we're doing this right now is social distancing, right? So, but I think there's more to this than just that.
Certainly, like, absolutely true right now. But let's say like 6 months from now, hopefully, whatever it is, when we can finally maybe, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a hybrid shift now where some people are going to be working at home even after this because people find out that it works pretty well. So then what do? I think the key is like, first of all, recognizing that it's not the same everywhere. Like, some people who work locally are just going to have more physical interactions. They're going to be together more. They're going to do some things that you can't do remotely. That's going to happen. However, there are some techniques that we use at Basecamp to sort of help level that. One of the things we do, so Basecamp has a feature called automatic check-ins. And this is a feature that automatically asks people questions on a given schedule automatically. So, for example, every Monday morning, Basecamp asks our entire company automatically, like, what'd you do this weekend? Now, this is a totally optional question, okay? completely optional. You're free to share or not. But the point is that what it does is it prompts people to share some of what they've been doing outside of work with everybody else. So we have employees who live all over the world. So it's really cool to see someone in Spain doing something, and someone in Brazil doing something, and someone in Canada doing something, and someone in the US doing something. And this is a way to, so we're all not all together physically, but this is a way to share those moments with one another, so we get to see a little bit each of other's humanity essentially, and to see what people are doing. And this is a way where these are events are spread out around the world, but they're shared in the same manner in Basecamp by writing them down, by sharing pictures. Sometimes people share video. And I mean, I didn't get permission to share some of the stuff. Maybe we'll do this later, but I could actually walk you through some of the examples at some point, perhaps, of what that looks like. But that's a way to encourage people to share physical things that are happening in their lives that are not happening at work and not happening around other people, but that inform other people of what's going on.
I'd also bring up, when it comes to the actual work part, leveling the playing field is the way to go. Don't have 5 people sitting around a conference desk and then one person dialing in from the outside. That is such a shitty experience. The lag between who's dialing in from the outside and the people who sit around the desk is just insufferable. And I think actually this is how a lot of people get a bad impression of what it is to work remotely, because they get this experience where there's 5 people around the desk and they're all there in person, there's no lag, and then someone is calling in from the outside and it seems like they're just on another planet. It doesn't work. So even if you have the setup where some people are at the office and some people are remote, level the playing field. When you do a call that requires remote workers, do it all remotely. Get into your own offices, sit at your own desk or whatever, and use a video chat system instead. The absolute worst way is these conference phones where people dial in. The lag is horrendous, the quality is terrible, and when you mix it with people who are in the office, it just feels really shitty. I'd also say, as Jason was just giving the same announcement there, shifting most of this stuff to an asynchronous format, it's not just substituting all these meetings, right? Like writing it up instead. When you write it up, everyone is on the same page. Whether people read it in the office or they read it at home, there's no disadvantage. So becoming better writers, becoming more frequent writers and making that the default, and then occasionally leveling up to having a call when you actually need to debate something. I think that's the other thing that sometimes people have a hard time figuring out. Like, when should I use a call? Like, what is the format I should use to call over? Should I use it for status calls? No. Status call, they're greatly written up. They're communicating information, facts in that regard. It works great when it's written up. People can read it, whatever. When you need to debate things, when you know there's disagreements about something, that's when we level up. Usually when we jump on a call is we try it writing first. We try just having that debate there. And then when it kind of hits the dead end where we go like, you know what, now we're just arguing back and forth and writing doesn't feel right for that, you level it up. So leveling the playing field, I think, is a good mantra, even if there's just one person. And that's actually the hard one, right? This is why a lot of companies have a hard time starting with remote. Because if you have like 40 people in the office and you have 2 remote workers, it feels like such a drag when you're doing a special concession for just one person. But that's the way to do it right.
The other thing I would say is, just as a practical example, we do have an office in Chicago. No one's there right now, but let's just go back 3 months. Office in Chicago, a handful of people there. If we ever have to make an announcement company-wide, I don't stand up in the Chicago office and make the announcement to the local people and then write it up for everybody else. I write it up for everybody, and that's all I do. So that's about leveling the playing field as well. There are not different announcements made locally versus remotely. There's one announcement made. It's posted to our Basecamp, what's called our Basecamp HQ, which is a project that everybody in the company has access to. And I can show you that actually in a bit. We'll get into some live examples in a little bit. But anyway, leveling the playing field is important. That makes everyone feel the same. It also helps reduce complexity, because if you give one message to one group one way and another message to another group another way, inevitably the messages are going to be slightly different. And you might leave out some information to one or add something to the other. And you're going to wonder, why didn't those people know about this? I thought I told everybody. Well, you told 2 different things. So by writing things up and posting them in one place, there's a central source of truth. And this is something we're going to probably come back to over and over. You want one central source of truth for everything that you say. You don't want to say things in multiple places in different ways. That's a recipe for complexity. So anyway, let's get to the next question here. Marjan, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, asks, how do you qualify employees and gain trust if you don't meet in person? That's part of that is the hiring process. So it starts before you hire someone. You don't hire someone you don't trust and then wonder how to trust them. A big thing, we're very careful about the hiring process. We spend months and months hiring an individual person. We go through many rounds of interviews, there's many people involved, and we really look at, we press people in this way, like, do we feel like we can trust them? Trust is a feeling, by the way, it's not a fact. Trust is something you feel about somebody. And you get there by asking different kinds of questions and seeing how responsive they are and seeing how good they are giving feedback and talking to people who they've worked with in the past. Those are the kinds of things that you do. But once you hire someone, you must trust them. Like, you can't figure that out later. So I think that it's hard to like give you a step-by-step thing, like how to land or how to decide to trust someone or not. But my bigger point here is that you've got to suss that out during the hiring process. And then once you have someone on board, you must trust them. If you don't trust them, you're already in too deep. You're already in too deep. And that's what happens with a lot of managers where they go like, well, how do I know someone's working if I can't see them? Well, what does seeing somebody have to do with judging the work? Like, looking at someone pound away on a keyboard tells you nothing. All it tells you is someone's pounding away on a keyboard. Looking at someone playing with Photoshop or Sketch or whatever they're using doesn't tell you that they're designing anything. It just tells you that they're using a tool. You have to look at the work itself. And the work itself can be looked at from 6,000 miles away. It doesn't really matter where you are. So this idea of trust being a physical quality is also not true. You don't trust someone more because you can see them than someone who you can't see. So I just want to make sure that that's clear as well up front.
Yeah, I think it's funny because when I read the question, and we get this question all the time, there's just so many assumptions built into that question. Like, the assumption essentially being that most people are untrustworthy. That trust is this sort of rare quality that most employees are not worthy of. And you need to do these special hoops to get to that point. I don't believe that. And maybe that's because I've had different life experiences. Maybe we've been lucky at Basecamp. Maybe we've done all these other things. I think most people are trustworthy. When you go through even just a regular hiring process, by the time someone is hired, if you extend trust to them, they'll give trust back to you. But if you start out essentially not trusting them, right? The natural response from them is not to return the trust in kind, right? So you get what you receive, and what you should be giving is you should be giving that trust. And I think, unfortunately, as Jason said, this idea that you can trust someone and you can see how they work because they're pounding at a keyboard is where a lot of it lies. The lack of trust is a projection of someone's own insecurities as a manager, that you're incapable of evaluating the work on the basis of the quality of the work, because maybe you don't know the work. Maybe you just don't have the capacity or the insight to sort of assess whether the work is good or not, or it's done in a reasonable time or not. And you know what? If those things are true, you're unqualified to be a manager. If you cannot assess the quality of the work that's being done on your behalf or in your direction, you're unqualified to be a manager. And I mean, the hard truth is there are a lot of unqualified managers. And they help breed this idea of trust. And some of that qualification, again, is not a sort of character flaw. It's a skill. You can learn it. Like, if you are working in a company where you have people reporting to you, where you can't assess the quality of their work, figure it out, learn it, right? Like, people learn things all the time. You can learn to develop an eye for what works or not. I mean, we work in software, and there are plenty of very good project managers in software who don't know how to program, who still know how to assess reasonable sort of degrees of quality. And that is simply perhaps the key skill you have to learn as a manager. The key qualification is to be able to assess the quality of the work that comes out.
All right. David, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. I think this is a handle here. Nearjax, thank you for hosting this. How do you suggest we handle the situation where we haven't been a very remote firm till now, and hence suddenly transitioning to writing more and not going to work immediately? How can we help teams transition through this? What training, best practices can we provide? I think this is why we're doing this, for example. This is one example of just trying to share our experiences working remotely, because you're dropped into a bit of a new world and you have to learn some new habits and you have to learn some new skills, but know that it's not that different. People often, I hear a lot of people talk about like, well, there's certain people who are like just very good at remote work and you have to find those people if you want to work remotely. Bullshit. Everyone can work remotely. Like, it's not rocket science in that sense. There is a new set of skills and there are a new set of habits you have to develop, but everyone is totally capable of learning those things. Can't expect that it's all going to happen like now. We wrote a whole book about it called Remote Office Not Required, published 7 years ago, where we tried to lay out a bunch of things that we've seen doing some of that. Good. I know Claire from knowyourteam.com has released a big guide about managers new to remote work. So I think, there are a lot of information out there. I think for having someone at the company take a little bit of a charge to get a survey of all the guides and the write-ups and the instructions that are out there and help others send some tips like, hey, we're going to read this. Like, we're going to have a little book club here at the office and we're going to read this guide today. And then we discuss it tomorrow. What fits in with our culture? How do we do it? That's really what it is, right? Like, there's this set of skills here. You just got to try doing it, and you're gonna kind of suck, right? The first couple of write-ups, the first pitches you do in writing when you're used to just doing them in person, maybe they're going to be kind of a little bad. But sort of the good and the bad thing here is that we're going to be here for a while. Like, this isn't over next week. It's not over the week after that either. It may very well be months before things return to normal, right? So better start learning now and just get better at it. And at the end of it, you're going to be pretty good.
And related to that is leadership needs to have a certain degree of empathy here and recognize that people are going to suck at this for a while. It's not rocket science, but it's new, right? Like I said at the beginning, if you throw a new musical instrument in my hands and ask me to play it, like, no one would expect me to be able to play anything that makes sense. Luckily, with work, we have a head start here. So it's not about like not understanding the mechanics of a musical instrument. It's like writing instead of talking. You can just, first of all, one thing I would encourage you to do is just to simply write like you talk. Sometimes, actually, not even sometimes, most of the times, business writing is so banal and terrible because it's stripped of any conversational tone. And people try so hard to make their point when they can make their point just fine if they're speaking, but they can't make their point when they're writing because they're trying too hard. I would just relax a little bit here and just write like you speak. And if you're not even good at that, just transcribe yourself speaking and give yourself a 90% head start there. So like, be easy on yourself. The other thing is, and I was hoping to get to this in some other question, but like, businesses need to curb their ambition a little bit right now and recognize that time is going to have to be dedicated to adjustment right now. People have to adjust. They have to adjust at home. They have to adjust at work. There's a lot of adjustment that's going to happen. And you can't pile that in and have the same expectations of work getting done as you did 3 weeks ago. So maybe 20% of the time right now is spent on learning how to work remotely. And like David said, this is going to be going on for a while. And by the way, even when this is over, I think that this is going to be a sea change shift in working from home. A lot of companies are going to allow people to continue to work from home. And so this is a new skill to develop and a new opportunity here. This is not, it's clearly a scary time, but it's ultimately an opportunity to improve in a lot of different ways and actually make your company far more resilient. Imagine what would happen if everyone became a better writer over the next 3 months. That would be a good thing. But again, companies need to allow time for that to happen. So anyway, that's general.
I think it's also important to take note here that even when this is over, there's going to be some long and deep-seated resistance to working remotely. And some people are going to try to use the fact that this is a scary time where people are not going to be able to work at 100% as sort of a ding against remote work. Oh, look at this. Like we did all this from remote and like productivity dropped. Yet, you know what? If you had crammed everyone into the damn office right now, productivity would have dropped too, right? Like a lot of people are worried about this, as they should be. So make a little mental note about that, that if at the end of this, when we're settling the score on whether this remote thing worked for us or not, if you're not calculating in the fact that there's no way we're giving this a full fair shake in the sense of A/B comparison between working remotely or working from the office, someone probably has an agenda on how to tilt the boards there, and just get around that.
Brigitte asks, how to handle video meetings with more than 20 people? What are good rules and how to moderate this? This is a good point here. This gets back to the point about simulation that I don't like. Now, I don't know if this is exactly your question. I'll try to answer it my way first, then we'll come around and only you will know if it's the appropriate answer for you. But one of the reasons people have a lot of people involved in meetings at businesses is because they have large conference rooms and large conference tables. And around those large conference tables are a lot of chairs. And empty chairs aren't a good look. So you fill up rooms with more people than need to be there. 12 chairs, 12 butts and seats. That's how meetings often go. And this is an opportunity not to have to do that. We don't have to have 12 empty talking head boxes in your video chat thing. If there's only 3 people or 4 people that are required to jump in a meeting, then that's all you need. You don't need to fill up boxes on the screen. This is a great opportunity to limit the number of people that need to be involved in meetings and give that time back to those other 15 people. So if you only need 4, or let's say you only need 5 and you had 20 before, 15 people just got freed up to do some other things that are really important. And given the fact that right now, everyone's going to be a little bit thin on time and a little bit high in anxiety, it'd be wonderful to be able to give people more time back. So, I mean, the tactical answer is how to handle video meetings with more than 20 people. Like, you don't have meetings with more than 20 people. You don't have meetings with more than a few people. But if you have to find some video software to do that, and people come up with a system where they raise their hand or whatever, put a question in the chat. Like, but the point is like that is not actually addressing the root problem here, which is that meetings probably don't need as many people. So that's where I would begin to solve for this versus just trying to figure out how to simulate what it was like in person to have a meeting with 20 people. So anyway, that's my take.
Yeah, I think that this goes back to, what are you calling the meeting for? What is the purpose of this meeting? Is it to disseminate information? Unless that information is of truly high emotional stakes and it must be given sort of face to face, it shouldn't be a meeting. It should be something else. And if you're trying to address more than 20 people, the one thing, again, that these video chats and these meetings work very well for is for debate. Can you have a reasonable debate with 20 people, or 20 people going to go back and forth? Like, not that commonly, right? Like, if you need to have a debate with 20 people, maybe you can have a debate with like 5 times 4 people, right? If you have 5 different groups that have 4 people talking together. I found at Basecamp, whenever we have more than 4 or 5 people on a call, they're not great. The video chat formats, the debates that really work well is when you're less than 5 people on a call, usually even less than 4. I love 3. So for us, the 3 is kind of a magic number. I'd also say that this is one of those things where this is already happening. Like, people already, when they work in an office, they're calling meetings for 20 people, where 15 of them do not need to be there. Right? This is why we get all these stories about people like checking their phones at the desk and otherwise trying to reclaim some productive time, so just zoning out or not chiming in or these other things. This is something to embrace. I saw a write-up from, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, essentially coming with all these mandates about like, oh, well, now we have to work from home. Just like when you're being called into a meeting, make sure your video chat is on, just that I can essentially monitor that you're not just zoning out. Like, what? Like, if someone is not interested in the content of the meeting, the kindest thing you can do is to release them from that meeting. Why should they be in that meeting if they don't feel like they're getting value out of that, right? Like, free them up to use that time for work or for something else, and you're much better off.
One other thing I want to add is, And look, some organizations are enormous and need to have 20 department heads from 20 departments. I get that could be a scenario occasionally where that needs to happen. But in most cases, having 20 people and having 20 people's opinions present, it doesn't lead anywhere good, actually. And actually leads to indecision. In fact, if you want to be even less sure of something, all you need to do is ask one more person what their take is. And that's a great way to be less sure. So I feel like I know the answer that you want, which is like, which system should I use and what technique should I use? But really, our answer is too many people. And it actually is far worse via video than it would be in person. People speak up over each other. It's like, it's impossible. There's lag, you can't see someone coughs and like the picture changes to them. It's like too many people, too many problems. And I would just encourage you to really tone back and dial back and see if you can get by. And I bet you can. And those other people that weren't there, initially they might be like, why wasn't I included? But pretty soon they'll be like, thankfully I wasn't included because now I have other things I need to do that I can get done.
I'd say one caveat to this is if you have an emergency where every second counts, this is true at Basecamp. When our servers are down, every second counts. I mean, we're measuring this on a per second basis and we roll the whole thing out. We have used video chat systems in the past. And the way we use it is everyone is on, but a very small number of people are actually interacting. And everyone else kind of gets just to see that. It's almost like a theater-based operating room, right? Like you have sort of a surgical team of perhaps 5, 6 people doing the bulk of the work. They're talking. And then you have a spectator group of perhaps another 20, or in some of our cases, we've had 40 people who watch that surgical group do the remediation on the problem right now, and then they're taking that information and maybe some of them work support. They take what they learn live and communicate that to customers or something else like that. That can work. The mute button is certainly your friend, but I would say that's the only scenario at Basecamp where we have huge video calls like that. And they're not even, they could be something else. They could almost just be streamed. Like there's 5 people who need to see and talk to each other, and then there's another 40 who just need to spectate. And I mean, this is also one of those cases where if you do need something live, there are a bunch of spectators. Like chat is, again, not a bad tool for that. I'm sure we'll get other questions about chat, and we have a lot of opinions about when to use chat, and most of those opinions about when not to use chat. But in an emergency with a lot of people, we do need to keep everyone informed, and every second counts. It can work as well. So that can be a substitute too.
David, you want to take this one? I'll take the next one.
Yes. Jermaine asks, how do you prioritize your tasks that need to be done? Or in general, what is your productivity system or non-system? Yeah, great question. How do you figure out what to do, right? This is one of those things where when you, at the broad level, at the top level, this is what managers should be doing, right? They should be figuring out, like, what should we be working on? When should we be working on it? And what is a reasonable amount of time to spend to this? Now, a lot of this information, I think, is particular to the industry that you're in. We're in software. We wrote an entire ebook called Shape Up. It's at basecamp.com/shapeup that details how we prioritize work at Basecamp as a software company. And I'll just cherry pick out a couple of quick ideas from that we use in the software world. One of the key ideas from Shape Up is the idea of not using estimates. A lot of companies think accountability means asking someone to guess about the future, and then if that guess is wrong, then they're bad people. That's sort of a summary of accountability that a lot of firms seems to run on. It's a really poor version of accountability. A lot of especially creative endeavors cannot be estimated to any reasonable extent because you don't know really what you're building. You don't know how to build it. So we're just all making guesses, and humans are just terrible at that. So inevitably what happens is that the estimate is wrong, and then someone gets sucked in to working overtime or doing other things because like now they're accountable to this estimate they gave on something they didn't know how long it's going to be. What we do at Basecamp is we instead do budgets. So we say this general concept, let's say we're working on a new feature, it's worth 3 weeks. Make the best version of what you can of this general fuzzy concept that's just outlined, sketched in 3 weeks, and we will trust you to come up with the best version within that time. If it's going to take 6 weeks, it's not worth it, right? A lot of the contention around estimates comes in when you've blown the estimate, and then now people feel like, sheesh, this is taking 6 weeks. It was never worth that. Like, if I'd known in the beginning that it was going to take 6 weeks, we would never have started on this project. Bake that in right from the get-go. Set up a budget and say, this is worth 3 weeks. Make the best damn version you can within that, and then that'll ship. So that is basically the idea of keeping the scope flexible. You fix the number of people working on something. You fix the amount of time they're going to spend working on it, but you leave the scope of the thing flexible. So let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, and real quick on a personal level, my general feeling is that if you need to make a long to-do list of things you need to do today, you have too many things to do. You should really be focused on a couple things, a few things, and you should know what those things are. And if they're broken down at such a level that you have dozens of them, then you're probably getting too granular to begin with. And now you're struggling to come up with a system to manage your own work that probably doesn't need to be managed in the first place that way. So I don't have a personal to-do list like in the morning. I don't make like a list of the things I need to do today. I kind of know what I need to do today because I either didn't get those things, I'm working on a project that continues today because I was doing it yesterday, or something's coming up today that I need to deal with, and I'll do that. But I don't like over detail the work I need to do. And I know that's not how everyone's going to be able to work given whatever their work is. But for example, like here at Basecamp, when there's projects going on, like we have shared to-do lists for the work that needs to get done. And some people make individual to-do lists as well, but most of that work is shared in a Basecamp project so everyone can see the work that needs to get done, versus having separate lists of all the detailed work that needs to get done personally and that sort of thing. So it's a different way of looking at things, but I would not over-organize your time. Let me put it to you that way. I think that's kind of and you end up then, it becomes a chore. You end up being frustrated if you don't get through everything in that day. And you probably end up spending too much time jotting things down that you can just keep in your head. And if you forget them, they probably weren't that important anyway. And I mean, that's sort of the truth as far as I see it. So anyway, that's my take.
And then I would also say, like, it's easy to get lost in these individual to-dos, and rather than thinking like, what am I trying to get done this week? Right? Like, what sort of like major project do I need to move forward? Because I think a lot of people, they end up perhaps trying to track things in to-do lists or otherwise, and then at the end of the week, they're like, wait, what did I get done again? Like, what did I actually move forward? So being a little more coarsely grained in how you try to set this up, I think can help you moving this forward.
Another way to look at that would be like, by the end of the week, instead of feeling like you can look back and you checked off 120 to-dos, I'd much rather you have 12. Like 12 big picture things that you're trying to move forward. And that's enough. It's more than enough. Geez. In fact, every Monday morning, we ask everybody at Basecamp, automatic check-ins, the feature in Basecamp asks everybody at Basecamp, what do you plan on working on this week? And people write up what they plan on working on. And usually it's a few bullet points, 4 or 5 or 6 bullet points, some big picture ideas, some big picture things. And some things some of those things, all of them get done. Other times, a few of them get done. Some other things come up and those don't get done. Like, that's enough to kind of set it up in general. And then when your head's in the work itself, you kind of know what you're doing. You know what you need to be working on when your head's in the work. So I wouldn't keep pulling your head up and looking over here and figuring out what the next thing is and looking over here. Like, you kind of know what needs to be done. And if you don't, I would say get closer to the work itself, and you probably will. So anyway, we can go on and on that. And I know it's a little bit abstract, so it's maybe not that helpful, but that's just how we look at it. And so we're kind of sharing that. Igor asks, my understanding is that not everyone can do remote, this being not job related, but person related. Am I right? Do you believe any developer, designer, product manager, or whatever can? I believe everybody can work remotely, of course. Not if you work in the retail industry and you need to be on the floor, or you work in a restaurant or front of the house, or of course, like those things are not. But if you do information work, and the examples here, developer, designer, product manager / whatever, These are all informational work. This is all work done at a computer. If work can be done at a computer, it can be done anywhere you can put a computer. Everything I do lives on a 13-inch MacBook Pro. I can do that in person, sitting next to someone. I can do it 4,000 miles away. The work is happening in the computer. So it doesn't matter where I am, or what desk I'm sitting at, what city I'm in right now. Absolutely. Now, there are certain people, there's introverts and extroverts, and there's certain people who feel like they need to thrive around people. And I understand that especially during this time, it's going to be harder for some of those people to not have the human connections that they're used to having. So there's some of that going on, but can they do the work? Absolutely, they can do the work. And everyone has to make some sacrifices. There's a lot of people who are introverted who are forced to work at offices every day for years. They don't want to be there, but they have to put up with it and they deal with it. So now it's time for everyone else who feels like they can only work in an office. Now that they can't, they're gonna have to put up and deal with it as well and adjust. And I think that's the reality on the ground at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, what we're at right now is not like, what would you prefer? Like, what would be best for you right now? Absolutely fucking not. Get home, get out of the office. Like, we're not gonna have people sitting next to each other on goddamn computers that they could sit on 4,000 miles apart, as Jason and I right now, 4,000 miles apart. So this is sort of like, that's the question you ask perhaps like once all this is done, once everyone has had a chance to try remote for a long period of time, then you decide like, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to work in an office? Well, it's fine. Like, there's plenty of people who want to work around other people. That's great. Now is not the time to have that debate. Now is the time to get the fuck home.
How would you host a brainstorming meeting? I'm used to in real life service design type. Well, again, just because you're used to it doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be. I think that's the first thing to think about here is like, we've done this in person. Therefore, how do we do that same thing remotely? I wouldn't try to simulate that thing. So what you might instead ask people to do is I don't know how you do it, but to go away and present some idea, like to come with some ideas presented. So come with some ideas pre-thought about, write them up, sketch them out, and bring those things to each other. You can either do it via writing in a tool like Basecamp or whatever you might use, or maybe you have a video chat, you share the screen here and there, and you go around and talk about the work, whatever. But I generally think that brainstorming should actually be done individually. And then you bring those ideas to the group, and then you can discuss them versus coming into a room with a blank slate. And, hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I don't think that's actually productive in the first place. And so if, I don't know how you're doing it, but if that's how you're doing it, I would encourage you not to do it that way. I would encourage people to bring ideas to everybody and then discuss them together versus coming up with ideas on the fly from an empty room. That's my take on it.
This is one of the things I think we do a lot of at Basecamp. We call it the pitch. So you have an idea for something, or you even just decide that like, hey, here's an area we should have ideas on, and someone is designated to come up with the pitch. They'll post it in Basecamp, and we let it sit. We let it marinate for a little bit. The thing about brainstorming too is you get a bunch of people together in real time, and they start shooting from the hip. And sometimes good things come out of that. It's not that it can't ever work, but you know what? I also think even better things can come out once you plant a seed. You post a pitch and you give it a day or 2 days for people to let it marinate in their brain, maybe even sleep on it. And then they'll either present their own ideas back. And if there's then some sort of debate, like it's not like obvious what to do, call the video chat, right? Like, let's talk about the ideas that kind of seem to be in conflict, or let's try to see where they gel. A lot of times that's not even necessary. The number of pitches that either me or Jason or someone else at Basecamp will do, where the answer is, fuck yeah, this is great, let's do it. No meeting required. Someone sat down, thought about a thing, presented those thoughts, and the people went, that's great, let's go. No meeting required. It's a large share of the number of pitches that we do.
Cool. This is a tough one. Not exactly a remote work question, but I think very relevant right now. How do you properly handle large layoffs? over 10 people. To be honest, I'm the wrong person to ask. We've never had to lay anybody off. So I don't have that personal experience. The only thing I can say is God, what can I say about that? If we had to do something, I would be you have to be as empathetic as possible, but you also have to be as clear as possible with people. And what I would be careful about is false hope. This is one of those things that's tricky, especially like if you have to lay someone off or if you have to fire somebody or whatever. Especially with layoffs, like people don't really know how long this is going to go. So a layoff technically is that hopefully you'll be able to come back to work at some point. And I've seen some companies already saying like, we're going to close the office down for 2 weeks and then we'll be back. We'll be opening, March 30th or something. It's like, probably not. Don't put false hope out there because at some point it makes you look like you don't know what you're doing and you're uninformed. So I'd be very careful about that. So if it's layoffs, I wouldn't say like, we'll be back in touch in April. Like I would say, we don't know how long this is going to last. I'm terribly sorry about this. We've tried to do everything we can to prevent this, but this is the reality of the situation right now. And we hope down the road, if it's a layoff, that we can bring people back, but we just don't know right now, I think is the most honest way to approach that. But I don't have tactical experience in this. So I don't have much to share. Maybe David has something else to share, but.
Well, I've been on the receiving end, or I've worked at companies that went through layoffs, and I'm struggling to find like what is the good way to do it. Hopefully, someone has thought about this because everyone I went through, they were fucking terrible, and maybe that's just what they are. They are fucking terrible. I've not put enough thought into it to really think about how to do it better. Anything related to that we've done at Basecamp is that we've fired people who were, for whatever reason, we thought like it wasn't going to work out anymore. And in those situations, we always try to do it in person. We try to have a document ready that spelled out all the details. When someone is getting this information, it's a huge just mental shock, emotional mental shock. And they're not going to remember the things that were said necessarily when that happens. So they need something to hold on to after the fact. And in those situations, it was also not a debate. It was a statement of fact, right? Like we've already, by the time you're in that meeting, this has already happened. It's not a thing for us to sort of go over how it happened or whatever. And I think that's the other part of this. Keep it mercifully short. Like people are going to be extremely distraught after this, being stuck in some conversation with some person going over this, not that helpful. Again, writing it down. But I think, as Jason said, we're not the right people to do this. They're specialists, I think, at companies who've gone through this in multiple rounds or whatever, who hopefully have better information about it.
The one piece I would add, though, is because I've just read some stories about this, and you never want your employees to find out about this in the news or something like you have to tell people directly why you're making this decision, and you, the leadership or team lead or manager, whoever's responsible for this person needs to tell them. You don't want to send out some blanket statements. You don't want people to read about it in the news or hear about it in the news. You don't want people to show up. There's a small grocery store near us. This was a year or two ago called Stanley's in Chicago. It's like a fruit market, and it's a little grocery store, and people have been working there for 10, 15 years. And people came to work one day and there was just a sign on the door saying we're closed, we're done, or it's over. And employees had no clue this was coming. They didn't know, they didn't hear from anyone. They just showed up. They took public transportation and showed up that day and saw a note on the door saying you don't have a job anymore. There's no shittier way to do it than that. And you feel terrible for those people, and the management, you just want to fucking punch them in the face because that is just a heartless way to deal with people, to treat people. And so that kind of thing you want to be very careful about. So anyway, clear communication, honest communication. If there's paperwork required, have it ready for people. Don't say like, you're laid off, next week you'll be hearing from legal. Like, there should be no gap in time here. You got to have everything prepared for people and do your job as well. So that's that.
I'd say one other thing, the final thing about layoffs, what I've seen a lot of times is this sense of like, once the layout is executed, there's like zero trust. Like these are almost like alien intruders and need to be escorted out by security or something like that. If someone is being fired for being, I don't know, abusive or threatening or whatever, totally, that's a rational thing to do. But as a precautionary measure for everyone, that like all of a sudden now you're going to treat them as though they were potentially gonna, I don't know, do something terrible. Like, just no, right? Like, there's a lot of this cover your ass. Well, we're just taking like precautions in case. Well, also take some precautions for just the basic humanity of the situation.
Yeah. All right, next one, coming in from Twitch, I believe. What do you think are the key things I can do as a manager of a small team to make remote working a great experience within my team, even if our company culture is still catching up after being forced to go full remote? So again, this is a situation where I think empathy is required, and also just like pausing expectations. So let's say you're in the middle of a project last week, and then all of a sudden it's remote time. There's an announcement made, everyone can't work from the office anymore. Starting Monday, we're remote. The announcement's made Friday. You cannot expect as a leader that Monday everything's going to be normal. It's just going to be remote. Like, that's not how it's going to be. You need to cut back your ambitions a little bit. You need to have some time for people to adjust. You need to let people get used to things. You need to let people get their home office set up. You need to let people get the equipment if they don't have any. You cannot just assume that business is going to continue as usual. You have to dial back ambitions. You have to put things on pause for a little bit. So to me, that is the most important part here. People will figure it out. You will all figure out how to do this one way or the other. But you can't figure it out if you're also being pushed forward to do everything you were doing right before at the same speed in the same way. That's just unfair. It's just flat out unfair, and it's unreasonable. So I think it's incumbent upon leadership to slow down, to chill out for a little bit, to relax, to give people some space to figure this out amongst themselves, to get the right tools in place, the right protocols in place, to let people screw up a bunch of times here and force it to work. I mean, I always think about the opposite. Like, we've been remote for 20 years, right? We use Basecamp every day to do our work. I don't have to see anybody, whatever. If we were forced, if we said, you can't use Basecamp, everyone has to come to the office every day, what would we do? We would be like, oh, I don't fucking know what to do. Yeah, it would take us a while to figure out how to adjust to that. The same thing is true on the other side, of course, and for most people it's true right now, which is companies and leadership and management need to create some space for people to have the time to figure it out. Adults will figure it out. It's not that hard, like David said. It's not that challenging. It's just different. And anything that's different takes some time to break some habits and get used to some new ones. So that's the advice I would give people, is ask people, or ask your management if they're not giving you space, to give you a little bit of space. If you are a leader, if you are an owner, if you are a manager, if you have power in an organization, create some space for people. Let them ease into this, and don't just throw them at it and assume everything's going to be the same.
I'd also say, if you're a manager, now's a good time to be a leader. So step forward, make some decisions about how we're going to work together. There are a billion different tools you could pick. Pick some, or one, and go with that, right? Pick a tool and say, this is what we're going to do. Don't like leave it up to like, oh, I guess maybe we can use a little bit of this or a little bit of that. Like, now is not the time for sort of just the lack of clarity that comes from having everything everywhere. So pick a tool, run with that, and then be the example, right? Instead of being like, the first thing we do Monday morning is like, we do a video call that's going to last 2 hours with 40 people, as someone was talking about. No, you set the good example. By Monday morning, you have a write-up ready that's detailed about how we're approaching this, that's empathetic, as Jason is saying, in writing, like, hey, we understand that everyone can't work at full capacity. Jason shared a write-up that we had posted at Basecamp earlier this morning. You can find it on Twitter. Just do some of that, and then set out the work, right? Like, the other thing here is when people are under stress and they're fearful, now is the time to give them some guidelines, some boundaries, like, hey, okay, we can't just like do free-form critique. Right now, this week, let's just try to get through these 5 things. Let's just try to focus on this right now. So I said people can kind of almost be a little mechanical in their work as they get going. And then once there's momentum and we're going and we're posting in this way, things are good. But it really is on you as a manager to first find the way and then show the way.
The thing I want to add here, this is going to sound like a bit of a pitch for Basecamp, and essentially it kind of is, because I believe Basecamp is probably one of the best things you could be using right now. for remote work, but here's why. And I've heard from a few people about this. They're wondering, like, what do we get? We haven't worked remotely before, so what tools do we need? And people go off and buy 4 or 5. They buy a chat thing, and they buy a messaging thing, and they buy a file sharing thing, and they buy a scheduling thing. And what ends up happening is, in times of stress right now, if you pile 4 or 5 different tools in front of people and try to onboard them in 4 or 5 different tools, and there's no system in place, like, people are gonna go, where do I put the information? Do I put it here? Do I put it there? It's actually gonna be far worse. And you're gonna be digging yourself a very deep hole right now. What you wanna find is, I would encourage you to use Basecamp, but you can use whatever tool you want. But I would find a tool that's more of an all-in-one style tool that has all the different, or one all-in-one style product that has a variety of different tools built into it. So at the very least, if someone puts something in the wrong place, they're still putting it in one product. When you put something in the wrong place in the wrong product, it's a total mess, and people aren't going to know where to find things. And they're going to follow the wrong examples. So what you want is a central single source of truth. And if people put information in the wrong place, at least it's in the right general place. So I think that's something I would encourage you to. Whatever you want to use, it's fine with us, of course, but find something that handles many things together, and not just something that is a small piece of the overall tool set you're going to need, because you're going to find yourself in a deeper hole than you're going to want to be in a week or so, when people are completely confused and stuff's out. And people say, why didn't you see that? Well, it was over here. Well, I didn't know to look over there. I thought I was supposed to be looking over here. Like, this is what's going to happen when people are scrambling with too many tools at once. So pick something, stick with it, and run with that. Next question. Leonardo, how do you get aligned with coworkers without interrupting them through chat phone calls and respecting their time? This is a great question. And to me, this is not about local or remote. This is just about working together. Respecting other people's time and attention is the most valuable thing you can begin to practice right now. And the number one thing I would say is you don't need to be aligned all the time. First of all, you should be able to slide past one another. Sometimes you need something from someone else, okay, and you ask, but you don't want to have an expectation of immediate response. When you have expectations of immediate response, you end up driving other people crazy. And it's actually quite arrogant to ask something of someone and expect them to get right back to you. Like, that's saying that whatever you're working on is far more important than what they're working on. Who knows what they're working on? So the idea here is to relax your expectations of one another, build a little bit more self-reliance in effect. And if you're going to ask a question, before you ask it, perhaps see if you can figure it out yourself. If you can't figure it out yourself, ask the question, but don't expect people to get back to you immediately. Expect them to get back to you when they have time. And you can encourage that by telling people that, saying, hey, I'm stuck with this, whatever. I know you're probably busy. No rush. Get back to me when you have a chance. Like, we need to be able to practice reminding people that they don't need to get back to us immediately. And a lot of tools today that are instant tools, and we have these in Basecamp. There's direct messages, there's chats in Basecamp. Like, just because you can write the question quickly and you can send it instantly doesn't mean that you should expect a quick instant response on the other side. And while some of us might recognize that, I think it's important to reinforce that by sort of over-explaining that in your question. Say, get back to me when you have a chance. No rush, not ASAP. And of course, if it truly is, then it is, and you say that, but I would practice that. And remember that asynchronous work, which means not making things real time, which means not requiring people to be on the exact same schedule, is actually far more productive work in the long run, because people get to have long stretches of uninterrupted time to do their work. Then they're going to take a natural break and a natural pause. And that's when they might check their messages and go, oh, okay, Adam needs me to get back to him about something. Kristen needs me to get back to her about something. And so that's kind of how you do that. So don't put people on your schedule. Let them stay on theirs, and it'll all work out just fine in time.
So I had a couple of tactical ways of doing this. In Basecamp, we have all the tools, right? Like there's direct messages and the pings, and there's a chat. And it always seems like that's the easiest way to do, right? It always seems like it's the easy. I can just type it out. I'm just going to type to Jason one thing. The thing we need to remind ourselves at Basecamp even over and over again is this right for chat? Is this right for a ping? Because if we do a ping, it's unrealistic to expect that the other person is going to just ignore that ping until it's the right time for them. Like, some people are very good at that. I'm not one of those people, right? Like if I get a direct message from someone, I'm going to look at it right now, and I'm going to want to help them. So what we encourage people often is put the question or the request or whatever you're doing for alignment in another tool. For us at Basecamp, oftentimes it's to-dos. If I find there's some issue here in the product, like we're working on this Hey product right now, so I'm finding shit all the time, right? Like, I just noticed this thing, and my first instinct every single time is like, let me tell Zach about it. I just found a thing in the iOS app where it comes up with the wrong thing. Let me just ping Zach about it. And every time I have to stop myself. No, this does not need to be a ping. This is not an emergency. I can file a to-do item. I can assign it to Zach, and he will see it when he sees it. And I'll get an answer back maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. And if it's not urgent, maybe next week, and it'll be totally fine. The work has been captured. It's not lost. This report I have is not lost. It's right there. The same thing with a new idea, right? A lot of times what happens is you get a new idea into your head. You're so fucking excited about it. And you feel like I must share it with someone and I must get some immediate gratification back from that. So you do a ping or you do a chat. You just throw it into a chat room. What do you guys think about this? And all of a sudden, you've not just disturbed one person, you've disturbed 5 people. And you pulled them all in to an ad hoc discussion where they're just shooting from the hip about this grand idea you just had. Post a message instead. A message, you write it up, a couple of paragraphs. Again, people have this natural expectation that they can read a message on their own time, and they will. So a lot of this is picking the right tool for the job. And most of the time, the right tool is not chat. That's for emergency. And then final tactical thing I'd say, a thing we do at Basecamp is we call it office hours. So a lot of times the request when you need help, it goes to the same number of people. At Basecamp, we have 2 people who are JavaScript experts, for example. It's called our R&F team, Research and Fidelity. They field a lot of questions about JavaScript from designers, from other programmers, people who are trying to figure stuff out. And oftentimes, when you're dealing with JavaScript, that's with any other type of programming, you hit like a wall. You're like, I can't figure this out. Like, I just need this one thing. And you think, it's just me. I can just ask Sam. It's just one question. But it's never just one question, right? Because even just at Basecamp, we're a tiny company. We have, 15 people who could potentially have a JavaScript question during the day. So if just 3 of those initiate a conversation with Sam or Javon during the day, you've shot that whole day for Sam or Javon. So what RNF does at Basecamp is they reserve one day. It's Thursdays. And I think it's from 10 to noon. They have office hours. And you put your name on essentially like a little schedule and say, I would like some of your time during that time, and then we can discuss it. And it's so much nicer because first of all, what happens is a lot of, that's a bit of friction, right? You actually want friction. Kind of a problem here with a lot of modern tooling is it has no friction. Chat has 0 friction at all. It's a chat box to someone else's brain. You type it in there and boom, it's in their consciousness. It's a horrible lack of friction actually in that. And that's great in those tiny circumstances where it's truly an emergency, blah, blah, blah. Most of it is not. You want some friction. You want to say, oh man, office hours is 2 days away. Let me just try to figure this out. And you know what? 9 out of 10 times you will fucking figure it out. And then if you don't figure it out, you have a glorious 30 minutes with some experts who feel like they're being valued with their time because you took the effort to schedule with them. Who feel like this is the most important thing for them to spend time on right now, and it's quarantine time. It's just for this, and it's so much nicer to work that way.
By the way, little quick pitch here. In our latest book, It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, there's actually a whole chapter on this topic, called Office Hours, and it explains how we do it and why we do it. And it's a really valuable thing to do, and it's actually been kind of a game changer for us. And every different group in the company sometimes establishes office hours. R&F, like David was saying, is typically the most prominent one, but strategy has had them. I've had them. David's had them. Different groups in the organization have had them. Data's had them in the past as well. And some people might go, well, I can't wait till Thursday. It's Monday. Well, do something else. Like there's something else you can do. There shouldn't be these blockers that you can't move forward on. There's always ways around things. There's always things you can put on hold for a moment and shift to something else for a while. So anyway, the office hours thing's been a great help for us.
Let me make one last point about here is the power dynamics. If you are a manager, this applies 10,000 times more to you than to anyone else. When you ping someone and you're their manager, they will drop everything to answer you right now because there's an implicit understanding that their job depends on pleasing you. So you have so much more obligation to not use these tools unless it's an emergency. And I feel this every week, every day I feel this, because again, the instinct is, I'll just type it in the chat. And every time I do, people mysteriously have all the time in the world to help me figure this shit out. Of course they do, because I'm the goddamn manager, and like at the end of the day, I could fire them, right? So just have that in your head every single time you think of, I should just ask John about this. Like, John knows, right? Yeah, John knows, but respect John's time or Jane's time and put it on their plate. This is another thing we do. So sometimes you think of to-do items as like, hey, do something for me. It can also just be a question. We have Jane that works in data analysis for us. A lot of the sort of the work is just a question. Oh, I'm curious, like, I don't know, what was the sign-up rate last month or something if we don't have it on a dashboard? Let's say it needs some computation. It's just a question. You put a question on a plate. Everyone can see what the plate is. Everyone else can see what the plate is. You're not just fielding this question that I'm putting a question on Jane's plate that only Jane and I can see. A lot of times it's actually helpful to see, you know what? Jane might not get to my question because there's 5 questions ahead of me that are probably more important. I can also see whether they're more important, right? And making that visibility around the work and who has the request and so on is a really helpful thing. Office Hours does the same thing by allowing everyone else, they're putting the dates on there on the Office Hours, and everyone else can see that. So,
yeah, let me show you that actually. Let me try to show you that. I've not, let me see if I can share my
screen this thing.
Yeah, you can.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
Let me just see what happens here. Google, shit. I don't know if I can do this because
you're going to share your whole screen.
No, that's okay. I have to quit. Fuck.
All right. While you figure that out, I'm just going to answer a thing from Twitter, which is
I'll do that later.
Please don't touch your face. And that is absolutely true if you're outside. I have not been outside my house for 5 days now. The entire family has been hermetically sealed within this house for 5 days. So I'm kind of like just not being. I'm not in an office right now. That wall behind me is neither a prison cell nor an office. It is simply just my room at home where I work, and I haven't left the house for 5 days. And,
by the way, okay, people can still see me. So I can't share my screen right now because I have to quit this thing and
to give it permission.
So anyway, what I'm going to try to do later this week is don't quote me on this, but we're going to do another session where we're going to show people how we work using Basecamp. We'll actually show you our Basecamp account. We'll go through some things. What I wanted to show you was our data request list in Basecamp, where we have a to-do list on the data in the data project where people can jump in and add things to that list. So they don't have to ping Jane and make her stop what she's doing to field a request. So anyway, we'll try to do that later this week. I'd love to show people a little bit more in detail.
Let me just give a clue on that. Some people, if you're signing up for Basecamp now, this is the division between teams and projects. Yeah. Every team in Basecamp, like data has sort of a Basecamp for themselves, RNF has a Basecamp for themselves, and these are the teams. That's the first block up at the top. That's where we put these things, and we usually call it requests or the plate or something else like that, or triage, where they just add the to-dos, and then the team will go through these things. And they're separate from the project, right? Like the project is like, hey, we're working on this specific feature, and we're doing this. No, the teams are these long-running things that each team, like data analysis, they have their own Basecamp, and they'll field ideas and questions on them. And we'll show that.
What's nice too is you can subscribe to a to-do list. So you can, if you care, if you're Jane and you want to know whenever a new request has been added, you can subscribe to that list and get a notification. Meanwhile, I don't have to be bombarded with notifications on that to-do list because I haven't subscribed to it. So there's some of those little things. But anyway, we'll get into that when we do a little demo later this week of how we actually work day to day. Yeah, this is a great question. How would you encourage leaders to prepare, or how is Basecamp prepared to eventually, when large parts of workers will be sick for extended periods of time, adding more buffers to time estimates, et cetera? I mean, look, reality is what it is. So it's completely unfair if people are out sick, literally, or if there's someone in their household who's sick or whatever is going on. You can't expect them or the rest of the team to deliver what you thought they would be able to deliver in the same amount of time. You just simply cannot do that. So you must relax your expectations. You must relax. And the best way to do that is to get out ahead of it. And so we haven't posted this internally yet, so we'll make some little news here, I guess, in a sense. But we have this product called Hey coming out in April. Well, it's not going to come out in April anymore. It's going to come out later than April. Now, there's a few reasons for that. It was going to come out in April. But look, we have to slow down a little bit right now. We have to let people spend some more time at home, especially people with kids at home who are now in charge of health of childcare, because childcare is closed down and schools have closed down. Like, our full-time workers who have kids are essentially going to be part-time workers for a while. And so we have to say that's the reality, and we have to support them. And the way to support them is not by piling more work on them or demanding that they get the same amount of stuff done in a shorter period of time. They simply can't, and we don't want them to do that. So we have to relax that a little bit. Also, of course, like, launching a new product in the middle of a pandemic is probably not a very thoughtful thing to do as well. So like, part of this is also that. But a lot of it is getting out ahead and making an announcement internally, which we'll be doing later today, that, hey, like, let's keep working on Hey as we were planning on working on Hey. But late April is not our target anymore. Let's not work like as if it is, and let's not make you feel anxious about hitting that deadline when all of a sudden you have 15 hours fewer hours a week to work, that sort of thing. So I think it's very important to just be very clear and to be very understanding and show that as a leader, as an owner, or whatever it is, to your team, that you understand the reality on the ground. And it's not about we need to buck up. I mean, look, let me just say this too. There are certainly industries where, like, people probably have to put in more time now, like people who are researching a vaccine, like people who are creating masks. Like, okay, there's some industries probably where, like, we need all hands on deck right now. It's a national and a global emergency. Okay, your startup is not that, probably. Our software company is certainly not that. Even though lots of people use Basecamp works just great. Hey doesn't exist yet. We can decide to push Hey off a little bit here to release the pressure valve. That's on us as leaders to release the pressure valve. So anyway, that's my quick spiel on that.
I'd say the number one thing to remember here for all product companies, all deadlines are made up. We made them up, right? Like, we invented them. We can reinvent them and we can change them. Now, if you're working with clients where you have contracts and so on, maybe that's a different story. But in a lot of places, the deadlines you're stressing out about, they're made up, and you made them up, and you can unmake them up, right? You can change them. And I think that comes back to this notion of, or misunderstanding of what accountability is. Accountability is not killing yourself to reach made up goals, made up targets. That's the other thing. Sometimes it's deadlines and sometimes it's goals. Like, oh, our goal was to call so-and-so many customers this week or this month, or grow so-and-so much, or publish so-and-so much. These are all made up, and you can just change them, and you should.
Now, that's because facts have changed on the ground. I think that's the important part. I think what we're not arguing for here is deadlines that no one believes all year round. Like, you can't just keep moving your deadlines out. That's not going to work, right?
No.
This is about, like, when you set the deadline, there was a reality, and now there's a new reality. You have to also adjust the deadline given the new reality.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of the important point here. And if that that's not the case, then you should stick to those deadlines. Deadlines are very useful, important tools, but if the ground shifts, you've got to shift the deadline as well, or eliminate the deadline, or scale your ambitions way back. Whatever it takes, something has to give here. You cannot ask people to do more work in these kinds of times unless the work is critical life and death work. And yours is probably not, is sort of the answer. All right.
Yep.
Ooh, David, you want to take this one?
Yes. How can I best nudge our bosses in the right direction with this stuff? Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about a lot over the last few days, because I don't know if nudge is the right word as much as beat with a stick is what I've been trying to do on Twitter for a while. Started this weekend with companies that are failing to realize the gravity of the situation and are not allowing people who could work from home to work from home. And one tactic that I've used, and I'm not saying this is the right tactic for all cases, it certainly is not, but is to call that shit out, right? Publicly, leak it, get it out to journalists. I've talked to a ton of investigative journalists who are thankfully working on stories right now, calling companies to account for their shitty practices if they're forcing people who could work from home to come into an office. you could leak to some journalists. Hey, some safety tips here. Do not use your company email address to do this. Use your personal device. Figure out a way to do so where you can keep anonymity. There's just a story, I think it was this morning or yesterday, that a worker at Charter Communications was fired for bringing up this stuff to management, like why they weren't allowed to work from home when they could. You got to keep safe, and it's reasonable to be afraid that you would lose your job if you work at a place where they have still not gotten the memo, despite everything, that you should not be working from an office if you could work from home. Because you know what? Those are not considerate and kind people, and you should take your precautions accordingly. Now, let's say like that's one end of the spectrum. I'd be blunt here and say like, that's the shithead end of the spectrum, right? Like you're calling people into the office who don't need to be into the office just because like you're a shithead, right? Like, that's the most extreme end. Then there's also another end of like someone's not a shithead. They're just like not educated yet. They're trying to be kind. They just haven't understood it. You can send them resources, and there's a lot of information out right now. There's a lot of great write-ups of what happens with social distancing. I've seen some wonderful simulations that show how much we can do here if we do social distancing early, what the fatality count is going to be if we don't. Send those things. This is just science, right? This is science and projections, facts to people who were willing to listen, where they're not stonewalling because they're shitheads. They're stonewalling because they're uninformed. That's absolutely a thing. And I would start there, right? Like, don't assume that someone's a shithead until they have proven to you that they're a shithead. Then you go full bore, public shaming, leak to investigative journalists, the whole 9 yards, right? But let's start with something milder than that. And then also, some people may not know how to do this, right? This was actually the whole reason we wrote Remote Office Not Required in 2013, it was born directly out of Jason and I having conversations with other technology executives who seemed to simply be A, uninformed, and B, under-equipped to figure out how to do this. Like, they didn't have the skills, they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't know how to do this. Now, 7 years later, the information is out there. So if you care about this, nudge your bosses by sending them like tutorials, how we could do this, suggestions. Hey, here's a good tool we could use to do this. Here's some resources we can do. Here's the reasons why. Like, prepare the full argument, and sort of go with sort of best intention. Like, there's no blaming, there's no nothing. Just like, we're trying to get people safe. We're trying like keep a sort of open and helpful tone again until that's proven not to work. Then you go sort of more drastic from there. But you gotta approach it from like, maybe they just don't know. Maybe they just haven't realized. Maybe they're not following this stuff as closely as I am. You'd think like, yeah, that's probably a ding if someone is not paying just a baseline of attention right now. But okay, again, the most important thing is that like we gotta get people home and start working from home.
And even so, that's definitely the macro angle. And the micro angle is like, when you say like, how do we nudge our bosses to do some of this stuff? Like, what I'm also hearing is like some of the stuff like not having meetings all the time, or right. You know, like whatever, right? So a wholesale change is going to be hard for anybody. You don't want to give someone a list of 12 things they need to change. Try changing one thing. Try encouraging them to do one thing. Like this video conference with 18 people on Monday morning, it's just not working, boss, or Bill, or whatever you call your boss, or Sally, or whoever she is or he is. Can we try and write this up instead? Can we just try once? Can we try this next meeting that we would normally have? Can we try writing it up instead? Like, can we try that? And just kind of ease into some of these changes and show that, oh, gosh, that was okay. That was actually better. In fact, people seem to like that. In fact, we had a different quality of a conversation. Our quality of a conversation went up. People were more thoughtful. You know, what's really hard about meetings, people forget about this, is that everyone's on stage and everyone has to come up with shit on the top of their head. That's fucking hard for a lot of people. A lot of people aren't good at that. A lot of people are much better at thinking it over, thinking it through, and responding an hour later. Imagine if we could do that at meetings, but you can't, because everyone's on stage, the spotlight shines in different people's faces, and they have to say something brilliant instantly. That's hard. If you say, let's write something up and give everyone an hour or two to respond, or 3 hours, or by the end of the day, you're gonna see the quality actually of the discussion go up. That's what people are going to want, and your boss should want that too. So again, that's one small little tactical thing you might want to try that I think would be effective. So anyway, yeah.
And be that change. Be the change you want to see. If you want to get write-ups instead of meetings, start writing things up. Just start setting the example. A lot of these times, like, and maybe you can find a few like-minded colleagues who are also interested in that. Start setting the good example, and things sometimes follow. Because the other thing I'd say is people in positions of power are sometimes sensitive about even nudges, right? Like, hey, could we maybe write this up? Like, it's a very fine line between that and being seen as an attack for why haven't you already done it, right? Versus, here's just me. I'm putting out my work in the format that I think it should be in. This is a write-up of a pitch. I'm explicitly telling everyone just, hey, let's talk about this tomorrow. Let's give people time to think about it. Maybe you can just work within your group. I mean, the best is when these things come from the top, but sometimes they just can't come from the top. And then you grow it from the bottom up.
Next cue. You want to talk about that?
Where do you put, yes, I will do that. Where do you put ideas that are mostly about code?
I'll be right back. Go ahead.
Discussions in GitHub for that. Yeah, we get this question a lot, and some people seem to sort of think that we must have some ticketing system or something else like Jira, or nope, we just put it all in Basecamp. Anything that's about sort of the architecture, the approach, the scope, it all goes generally into Basecamp messages. If it's something that a team is actively working on, they're working on it together, some of that goes into chat. A bunch of it is then detailed into to-dos. But what we do use GitHub for, in terms of discussions, and what I think it's excellent for, is for pull request reviews. So GitHub has this feature, they've had it for forever, but where you can, on a per line basis, offer suggestions or critique of code. And we do that a ton. A bunch of what I do at Basecamp is to do pull request reviews. Now, that's a whole art in and of itself, and there's some great write-ups on how to do pull request reviews in a good manner. A good manner is not like, this is wrong, change it. A good manner is one of suggestions and one of kindness. And sometimes also realizing the limitations of the written word. If a pull request needs substantial change, sometimes writing up 45 individual lines is not a good way to do it. What you should do instead is level that up to an actual conversation with someone. We've been using this tool called Tuple, which is a screen sharing tool specifically built to do pair programming. Two people can get to run the keyboard and the mouse at the same time. It works excellently when you do a very in-depth code review, or you're trying to hash out a piece of code together. I'd say Tuple is really great for that. We've just used it. We have some teams who've used it a lot. I've used it just a little bit over the last few weeks, and I've been thoroughly impressed by it. It's called Tuple, Tuple. Use that, write up the big approaches about anything in Basecamp. Don't spread it out, I would say, such that you have like half the stuff in GitHub, half the stuff in Basecamp. If GitHub is your tool, then double down on GitHub. Like I think there's a wiki in GitHub. There's like you can do tickets in GitHub. You can totally do development in that. So if that's your jam, do that. What we do at Basecamp is we keep all of the sort of broad discussions at Basecamp, and then we just do the code reviews in GitHub.
What can you do for taking care of the emotional well-being of the work community that's going to be remote for weeks in the middle of such unprecedented crisis? Well, of course, this is up to each individual company to do so. Number one, we've got to be understanding of the situation. Businesses have to chill out. This is not a time for unlimited rapid growth, especially. This is not a time for outsized ambitions. This is a time to slow down a little bit, to understand the stresses people are under, to understand the stresses people are under at work and at home, especially parents right now, or people with elderly relatives or their parents who are nearby, and you're terrified of what's going on for them, and they're not listening. All this stuff. There's a lot of things going on in life right now. Just about understanding that and letting your employees know that you understand that, and acknowledging that we're all human beings right now. Like, we're literally all in this together as much as we've ever been, and just letting people know that you know that too. I think that is a big initial step. The other thing is, and I'm well aware that not every company can do this, but something we announced internally today is that, like, basically our full-time employees are essentially going to be going part-time because a lot of them have kids at home, half of them have kids. So they're only going to be able to put in part-time work, and that's fine. We're still going to pay them full-time salaries, but we understand that they're not going to be able to put in full-time, and that's just the reality. And we're not forcing people to have to take personal days or vacation days to make up for those moments when they simply just cannot work for whatever reason for a day or two. So, if you can relax some of those policies and let people know that they don't have to be worried about, like, what if they want to take a vacation in December, they're going to blow through all their vacation time right now because they have to make a run to the store, although everything should be delivered right now. But if you can't, for whatever reason, you need to go run to the store with your mask on, whatever you need to do, like, people shouldn't feel like they can't do that right now because work's going to ding them for being out for half a day. Like, we need to relax those things and chill out. So anyway, that's my general point of view on this.
I would say the second thing is here, do not fucking gaslight people. The number of company announcements I've seen that start something like, the most important mission at company XYZ is the well-being of our employees. It starts like that, right? And then it goes down to, but we still expect everyone to do all their commitments, come into the office. Like, what the fuck are you doing? If you're not going to be a sort of a company that is invested in the emotional well-being of your employees, as the question puts it, don't pretend to be. Just say the things you're going to do and do those things. I mean, of course you should be emotionally invested in, but it's even worse when you're being a shithead who's pretending to be caring at the same time, right? Like, that's really the worst. And I'd say a huge number of the reports I've been feeling, so part of this calling out companies that are not allowing people to work from home who could work from home is I set up this email address called corona-reports@hey.com, where people are essentially leaking bad places of employment, and they're sending in these announcements, and my head is just blown. They're full of all this fake concern. It's all words, and then there are no actions. Or worse, it's all words, and then the actions are, I still expect you to do all your commitments. Basically, there's no slack. You still got to do everything. And I just go like, you motherfucker, right? Like, as Jason said, like, the impulse at this time is there's a lot of managers I'd like to punch in the face, right? It just seems like it's so callous, so uncaring, and it's not going to work. Like, that's the thing that's really just aggravating, is that, like, you can call everyone into the office. Do you think you're going to get 100% out of anyone right now? No, you're not. You're absolutely deluding yourself. And if you are calling people into the office, what are you? How many days are you away from someone saying, like, oh, I've been tested positive? And now what do you have on your hands? Someone exposing the rest of the company to this, and potentially more employees. Like, it just doesn't even work, right? So even if you are just like, well, I need to maximize the, or you feel you have to, I'm sympathetic with that too, is some companies they don't have a lot of slack. Their margins are very thin. They do feel like, well, we got to do everything we got to do. That's fine to believe that. It's fine to want to do that, but you got to accept reality. And reality is you cannot get 100% out of everyone. And reality is calling people into the office right now is just grossly irresponsible, and you need to stop doing that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other things that you could do. I mean, one of the things you can do too is you can simply ask people how they're feeling. You can set up a place for people to share their own little self-care techniques at the moment. Like, a lot of people aren't really sure how to cope or what to do or what's safe or how they should be feeling right now. Some people are trying to feel like they're really strong right now when they feel very vulnerable, but they're afraid to be that way. And I think it's important for leadership, especially, to set those examples that it's okay to talk about these things. Maybe these are things we don't normally talk about at work, although I would say that it's healthy to talk about this stuff at work. But let's say you don't normally. Well, now is definitely a time to do that, and set up a place where people can do that, or have if you have an HR team or HR, like, have them reach out to people and see how they're doing. Like, show concern, show legitimate, genuine concern for people. I think that's a really important point right now. some of the things that we've seen internally is when we've posted some of these announcements, it's just people just simply appreciate that we understand the situation that they're in. It's not that we're able to change the situation all that much. I mean, we can certainly give people a little bit more time and not let people worry about taking some time off, whatever, but we can't send childcare to people's houses. I can't fix that problem, obviously, right now. But what we can do is we can acknowledge the fact that we understand that that's a hardship right now, a real extreme, serious hardship. And like many times that's all people want to know is that you understand where they are and what they're going through. And you want to do it in a genuine way. So I would just recommend that, first of all, like David was saying, a lot of these corporate announcements are such bullshit and people can see the bullshit. They can read it right. It's so obvious. There's nothing more obvious than bullshit. And when you write an announcement that shows that you don't really care or that you say one thing, but you act a different way in that situation, people aren't going to trust you anymore. And you're actually going to damage trust, which is what you really need right now moving forward. So I would think those things through.
And I also say, again, on the same level of, let's say you're our company, you feel like you got to do some things, and you got to call people in. You got to think that you can ask them to work 100%. Do you know what? If you make it through this, people will remember. Let's say you get through this and your business is still there. Like everyone is fucking putting in their CV somewhere else, right? So it doesn't work in the short term because it's unrealistic, and it doesn't work in the long term either because people remember. And I think that's just, even if you're just focused on yourself and your own goddamn business, the self-preserving thing to do is to be a kind, understanding human being, because that's what's going to actually work.
All right. You want to take this one, David, and I'll jump in after?
Sure. How do you each spend your typical days at Basecamp? How do you balance team collaboration and meetings with more solo or deep work? I think everyone have a different routine. My routine is usually I start working at around 9:15 Pacific time. That's when I've dropped off Kit at school. And then I spend the time before lunch on collaboration, writing things up, chiming in on things, reading things, catching up. And then the 4 hours or so after lunch is when I do my deep work. I'm on the West Coast, so it's helpful that most of my deep work actually happens when some people at the company are already off. It's easier to focus like that. So that's my routine, splitting the day up in half and half. It doesn't always work like that. Some days I'm really fired up about something I'm working on, and I kind of just ignore the collaboration for a day or two, and then I do the whole day as deep work as best I can. And other days, now is a good example, not a lot of deep work has just happened just the last couple of days, right? Like we've been focused on other things, and then the whole day is collaboration and chiming in and getting things settled.
Yeah, and mine's very similar. As far as like, we don't have pre-scheduled meetings, so that it's just, we don't have that as a impediment to our day. We'll have ad hoc discussions between 2 or 3 people. Sometimes we'll jump on a video call, like me and David and someone else, Jonas, lately we've been having a call once a week, just 3 of us to kind of go over where we're at with Hay. But we don't really have anything scheduled beyond that. So my days are kind of jumping around whatever needs to be done. Like I've been doing a lot of writing lately, so that's kind of my focused work. But there's still ongoing projects going on with Hay, and I'm reviewing all the work that's happening occasionally whenever that's necessary. So you just kind of bounce around, but I don't have a standard day other than like I usually start around 9 as well, and kind of end around 5. But sometimes if I take a few hours in the middle of the day to go take a walk or something, I might make up some of that time at night. So it all sort of depends, but that's kind of how we do it.
What I will say though is it is good to have an idea that it's valuable to protect your time. If you think the entire day is for team collaboration and you're trying to be kind and you're trying to respond to everyone who pings you, you will end up at the end of the week having not gotten the things done you wanted to do. And that's not a good place either. This sort of both the self-care and the collaborative care is that you take time away for yourself and you reserve hours where the main thing you focus on is your solo deep work. And it's only emergencies that should really burst that membrane.
The other thing I want to add to that is, this is maybe going to come as a shock to many people, we don't have a shared calendar system at Basecamp. So I can't see anyone else's calendar and no one can see mine. And that is intentional. We do that so nobody can easily take each other's time. If you look at your own schedule, your own calendar right now, I would bet you that the majority of the time that's blocked off was blocked off by somebody else. Most people don't even have control of their own day. And so you can't expect people to get work done if they don't even have control of their own day. So at Basecamp, we prevent people from taking each other's time systematically. If you want someone's time, you simply ask for it. It's a negotiation. It's valuable. So you'd say, hey, David, are you free tomorrow morning at noon? Or well, that wouldn't be in the morning, but at 10 a.m., I want to go over something with you. And he'll be like, no, I'm busy. How about 4 in the afternoon? I'm like, that's cool. Let's do that. Or whatever. It's actually a negotiation. And it's hard. And it might be a hassle. It's like, well, we might throw out 3 or 4 times, none of them work. And you're like, well, we should use a system for that. It'd be so much simpler if we had a calendar. But there's trade-offs. When it's really easy to take people's time, you end up taking more of it. The easy things to do are the things you keep doing. We want it to be hard to take people's time from one another. That requires everyone to be in full control of their own day, and they get to dole it out as they wish or as they don't wish. So the tools you use, the systems you have in place have a huge impact. You can't just say it's like, well, some people use it well and some people use it poorly. Like, systems have defaults. Software has defaults. Every feature you see is a default decision by the company that develops it, and every system you use you would essentially adopt those defaults. And so if you have a calendar system that runs your company, essentially, you are defaulting to the calendar company's assumptions about how time should be split, shared, whatever. It's your company, it's not theirs, but you are defaulting to the way they encourage people to take time from one another. And you know what? They're going to make it as easy as possible because that's the business that they're in. They're in the calendar business. So they're going to make it really easy to take other people's time. So you've got to be very careful about the tools you use. And I don't care how popular a tool is or what other people are using. What matters to you? How do you want to work? That's what you should be looking at. So it's very, very important to be very selective and careful about the stuff you use, and don't just spin up a bunch of stuff because it's the hot tool of the moment.
Friction is a feature. Like, there's so much of software that's all about just reducing friction to an absolute minimum and juicing engagement to an absolute maximum. And that is just, that's in their interest, right? In some cases, it should not be in your interest. And yeah, man, I love not having a calendar. And it's so funny too, because whenever I talk to people who run on calendar systems at their company, they're sort of just assuming that that's how the whole world runs. Like, I'll just send you an invite. I very rarely click on those invites that you send, like the little ICS thing or whatever, and you can say yes or no. I'm manually typing that thing into my calendar because I want it to feel annoying to me too. I don't want it to be a one click for me to get someone on my calendar, because it's so easy a week in advance to say, sure, I'll do it, like one click, right? I want the friction of having manually data entry to remind me, actually, do I want this? And the number of times where I've started typing out call with whatever at 10:30 and then, fuck it. Escape? No. Right? It's really helpful to just have some cool down period there. If you don't have any cool down period on saying yes, and it's just a click, and you're going to do the thing that has the least social friction, right? You don't want to say no. You want to be kind, like, if you have the calendars visible to all and there's a gap, are you going to be the person who says, like, no, I don't want to talk to you? No, that feels awkward, right? Why would you want to invite that awkwardness? And you can just not do it by not running your company on a calendar.
The other thing about that is it's your calendar. It's your time. And what David was just saying makes a lot of sense, because it's like, if you want to put something on your calendar, you should put it there. Even if someone asked you for your time, you should put it there. You should not let anyone else put anything on your calendar. It begins to create a gulf between your time and your actions. And pretty soon, before you know it, it's like people fill up my calendar all day long and I have no fucking time to do anything else. So anyway, we can go on this rant forever. We've written about this in a bunch of our books. Shared calendars are some of the worst inventions made by software companies in the past 20 or 30 years. There are some good ones that don't have all this invite stuff going on. And calendars are wonderful things in general, but things that make it easy to take other people's time, not so much. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Let's see. How do you set up a culture and understand cultural fit when building fully remote organization? This is a good topic to talk about, which is culture. What is it, first of all? Because we can't talk about fits or building one without understanding what it is. And it's my view that culture is not something that's created. Culture is something that exists. It is the byproduct of consistent behavior. It is what you simply do. That's what culture is. So that's the important thing. It's not about, so it's like when you hire people to fit into your culture, like what does that even mean? Do you even know what it is? Is it what you say it is, or is it what you actually do that is what it is? And it's what you do. And so I think that's the first step here, is understanding that. And I've seen a lot of companies with long lists of missions and statements and whatever, and who we are and what we are. And if you secretly pulled every employee into a room and said, is that who they are? They would go, no, that's not how it is. That's not how it is here. Let me tell you how it actually is. And how they tell you it actually is the culture. That's what culture actually is. So that's the baseline thing I want to start with. As far as like remote or local, I mean, again, in my opinion, I know this is just my opinion here, but there's nothing that magical, or let me put it to you this way. Seeing people in person doesn't create a culture either. It's just that they happen to be there. It's not that anything is magically created because of that. Culture is how you treat people, how you work with people, how patient you are with one another. These are the things that you actually do. How you ask for feedback, how you give feedback, how understanding you are when people have to be out for a few days or whatever it might be. Those are the things that you actually do. So that to me is independent of location. Now, that said, let me give you a few tactical things that we do here, because we are pretty much fully remote. We do something, we haven't done it for a little bit, but we typically do something once a month called the 5 by 12. 5 meaning 5 people, there's my 5, and 12 meaning one month per year, 12 months. 1 day a month, we pull in 5 random people. They get an invitation about an hour or something before this event. And then it's also plus me and David, so it's really 7 by 12. But anyway, we do a video chat once a month with 5 random people across the company. And it's about a 1-hour chat. And we cannot talk about work. There's no work discussion whatsoever. And this is about mixing people who often don't work together. There's people pulled from every different department, people who don't often work together. And we just talk about life, talk about things that are on our minds, talk about the shitty bread in the United States. That's David's favorite topic. Talk about air quality, talk about a whole bunch of global warming. These always get really morbid and terrible, but they're fun. And the point is that that's something we do just so people can get to know each other in a way that maybe you might get to know each other around lunch if you are physically in the office. These are sort of conversations you might be talking about in physical proximity that you might not talk about remotely, but we kind of encourage people to do that. So we do that once a month. Then we transcribe that call, and then everybody in the company gets a copy of that transcription. So the 5 or 7 people that are in the call get to have the real life experience. We don't record that, by the way, although I don't know why we don't, but we then transcribe it, and then people can read up on it later if they choose. So they're part of it as well. And so this is a random list of 5 that keeps going around, and we keep changing it. And it's a really nice thing to get to know people and get to talk to people and get to see what's going on in people's lives. On top of the fact that we also do that automatic check-in every Monday morning, which is what'd you work on this weekend. Once a month, we also ask people, what have you been reading? And people share book reviews and topics that they're interested in. There's other things you can do there. And I've heard from a number of employees who never worked remotely before, who work here now, who say they know their coworkers far better than they did at their other job, even though they barely see anybody. So you can really make sure people know one another, even if they don't see each other.
I think the other thing here is that example I was just giving earlier, where this announcement comes out, like, we are a company that cares the utmost for for all our employees' well-being, right? And then they essentially detail all the ways they do not care about the well-being. This is how you create culture, a culture of mistrust, a culture of sort of management is full of bullshit. Like, I think that's a lot of times is there's the sort of the active statement, right? Like, active statement is we care about our employees' well-being, and then there's what we actually do, and then the active thing serves. If you just said like, hey, you gotta come to the office, We expect everyone to do everything all the time. You would have at least created a culture that's like consistent or cohesive or congruent. It'd be a shitty one, but it'd be congruent, right? Like 10x worse is to do that and then add on top this culture sprinkles where we're basically just gaslighting everyone by saying like we care about you, even though here are the ways we don't care about you, right? So this was why for a very long time we haven't focused very much at Basecamp about the writing it out, right? Like in software, we often talk about frameworks are extracted. First you write the real code, and then you extract the lessons from that and put them into sort of a toolkit. Culture and writing up about culture is much the same way. We've written up our company handbook after like what, 15 years? What was the company handbook? Was that just us sitting and brainstorming what it should be? No, it was an extraction of what we actually do. And one of the things I tell all new employees that start at Basecamp, and I get a chance to talk about this stuff with, is like, hey, you are in a uniquely valuable position right now. You can tell us all the bullshit that we pretend is true, right? Read our company handbook, tell me what's not actually true. Because the other thing is you get marinated in, not just in your culture, but your misperceptions of the culture. Yeah, the mythology of what the culture is. Oh, we're a company that cares about our employees. And then if you're not, like you kind of need someone to actually tell you, dude, you're full of shit, right? So I think this is what new employees, if somehow you do have a culture where there's honesty, maybe that's not actually a thing that'll happen that often if you are a company that's sort of gaslighting everyone. But at Basecamp, this is what we try to do, is use the fresh eyes that someone new to the company comes in with. And we change the company handbook a ton of times, because this is also, it's being read for the first time. They're not, none of the assumptions are sort of baked in. They just take what we say and like, is this what we actually do?
One other thing here's just another quick plug for the book. It doesn't have to be crazy at work. The reason I'm showing you this is because if you go to the table of contents, we have the longest chapter is called Feed Your Culture. And there's 16 essays in that chapter, okay? And we have a lot to say about this. In fact, out of the whole book, there's more essays in this chapter than any other chapter. So if you're interested more about how we talk about culture and how we believe in culture and how we think about culture, pick up It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, and then check out that Feed Your Culture chapter. All right. So let's see, we've done for an hour and 45 minutes. Why don't we go for another 15, see where we're at, and then we'll figure out things from there. We'll see if the questions are if we feel like we've answered the questions. I think we're probably pretty full, and 2 hours is a long time for anyone to watch us rant on stuff. So, all right, how do you help first-time work-from-home employees to ensure we are getting the most out of them? Now, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you didn't really kind of mean it that way, but I'll still address it. Like, getting the most out of somebody, to me, is not ever the goal. It sounds like you're trying to extract or squeeze. I'm not a fan of that method of management. I think what you want to do is get the best out of somebody, and the best is not the most. The best is the best. And so what you want to create is an environment where people can do the best work of their lives. And to me, this is no different this is not work from home versus local. This is just, what is your environment like? How much autonomy do people have? How much trust do they feel? What size are your teams? Do you have too many people involved in a project? That makes it really hard actually for people to do the best work of their lives. Do you take care of people? Do you pay them well? What are the benefits like? How fair are you in certain situations if someone needs time off or needs something to deal with? Those are the things you can do to create the environment so people can give you their best and want to give you their best. I think that's the other thing. Like, you might be able to whip someone into shape in a sense. Like, there's a lot of companies that hold carrots over people's heads and bonus, just do your best. Like, yeah, maybe you can get a lot of work out of somebody, but it's not the best work, and they're not going to stick around. I mean, like, that's unsustainable. It's totally unsustainable. I mean, you could say that, like, there are moments that come up where you want to motivate people in extra ways. I don't know. I'm still not even a fan of that, but fine for a moment, but that's not a sustainable practice. So yeah, it's a mind shift. It's not about getting the most, it's getting the best. And that starts with you as leadership, creating an environment where people even have the chance to do their best work. Anyone who's listening to this right now, if you don't have an hour or two, or actually, if you don't have 3 or 4 hours a day to yourself, it's going to be very hard to do your best work. And I think most people, if they pulled their calendar up right now, they'd go like, it's like fucking Tetris. There's boxes everywhere. I have no time for myself. Oh, there's a little small gap. Maybe I can fill that with something. Like, that's not an environment where you can do your best work. A great open schedule is an environment where you can do your best work. A moment or a place where people can't take your time from you is where you can do your best work. A company that supports you and allows you to work from anywhere that you need to on your own schedule. That's how you can probably do your best work. So anyway, it's about best, not about the most.
I think this comes up too in job openings often. People talk about like, we're looking for a rock star programmer, a ninja designer, something else like that. They're not thinking about like, do we have a rock star environment, right? Start there first. The number of people who can be wonderful employees at your company is almost endless. It is up to you to create that environment to make that happen.
All right, let's take this one here. How do you manage boredom and anxiety? And I'll also add isolation, even though it wasn't in the question, but I know people want to bring it up while working remote alone. This is a real thing for a number of people. No question, even people here at Basecamp have brought this up before. And what's been really great is, first of all, talking about it is the first thing you need to do. If you feel isolated or lonely, or like, tell your teammates, tell your manager, tell your team lead, tell somebody. And people are very accommodating and very understanding in those situations, because a lot of us have dealt with that. I think one thing that's really important is I mean, again, like, we're in an extreme situation right now where we shouldn't be outside of our homes or talking to anybody, or we can talk, but like seeing other people. I was going to say, like, you can go out and get a coffee, you can go out and take a walk. I mean, taking a walk I still think is fine, but like, you want to stay away from people and whatever. So like, we're in a slightly different situation than normal. But in normal times, what I would encourage people to do is to get out of the house and take a walk, do something else for a while, break your day up a little bit. Just make sure your team is in the loop if you're going to be out for a while. Say like, hey, I'm out for this afternoon, or I got whatever, I'm going out with my kid, or whatever it is. I'll be back later. I'll make up some time later. If there's anything you need me to do, just make a list, or whatever it might be. Just communicate, but break up your days. And that can also mean just watch some TV. It can mean whatever else makes you feel comfortable. Maybe making a hot pot of tea, maybe making yourself lunch. I don't know what it is, but break up your day, because if the feeling of being alone working is what's isolating, then you want to break up the feeling of working alone by not just working alone. You might want to do something else for a while. So those are some things. Now, hopefully in more normal times, there's a lot more things you can do. You can go to a coffee shop, you can go to a co-working space, you can go to a public library, you can go to a public event, you can do other things, you can see more people in the park, you can go jogging and wave at other joggers, whatever it is. But right now, I think we're in a different situation. So I think you're going to have to also, like, people are just going to have to cope for a while. We are all going to feel cabin fever, even those of us who are used to being at home. This is like extreme. This is like we are in our homes, not just working from home. This is like, you're not going to the restaurant, you're not going out. Like, that's what this is. And that's going to be very difficult for a lot of people. So I think we can't cure that because we can't go out into public spaces right now. So I think the best thing we can do is talk about it and empathize with one another and sympathize with one another and share and kvetch with one another and share our loneliness and say, like, this sucks. I feel totally isolated. It's weird. I'm not used to this. I don't feel good right now. Like, talk about it with the people you work with, or your partner, or whoever, your friends, and get it out. And that's the only, and that'll help quite a bit, because isolation means you feel by yourself, and you might physically be by yourself, but emotionally you can be with others. And I think that's the important part here.
I'd also actually give a plug here for chat. We give chat a lot of shit at Basecamp because it's not a great way to work in many cases, but it is a reasonable substitute for human connection. Like, the main thing we use chat for at Basecamp is the human connection. Sharing funny things, or sometimes not funny things, news stories right now. We have a team on our Basecamp called All Parents, where parents are sharing stories about like, oh, now we're new to homeschooling. Now we got to do this thing. We have all pets that for people with pets who share pictures of their dogs or their cats or whatever. Using chat for that social connection is really nice. Don't have it necessarily open all day long. That's not great, but you can just check in on it a few times during the day and feel like you are, actually, I'm part of something. Even if I'm here alone, there are other people alive in the universe. I happen to work with some of them. We can share laughs. We can do something else, get our minds off things. And chat is actually pretty great for that.
Yeah, I would just encourage you to turn notifications off for that. This is more like,
for sure.
Just like go in when you want to take a break. Like the all parents team we have here, like there's some really wonderful resources being shared and people sharing their stories about boredom. And we're only essentially kind of on day 2 here. And people are like, oh my God, this is impossible. So just like being able to say it's impossible out loud and having other people go, yeah, it is fucking impossible. Yes. And that's how I feel in Kentucky. And that's how I feel in Portland. And that's how I feel in Chicago. Like that really helps a lot. So I agree with David on that. So, all right, let's take a few more. Maybe, I don't know, Andy, if there's any sort of rapid, although that's really on us to give short answers, but any simpler questions perhaps we can jump in on here? This is interesting. So what technologies are you excited about outside of Basecamp to help support remote? I mean, I believe in the simplest possible stack that you can have, because I think that, I know I'm a little bit different here than most, but I have a 13-inch laptop and that's all. I don't have an external monitor. I don't have 2 computers. I have 1. Because I want my situation, my setting to be the same no matter where I go, and not feel like I have to adjust to something else because I don't have this, or I don't have enough room at home like to have 2 monitors. So now, but I'm so used to working with 2 monitors. So in general, as like almost like a personal technical hygiene thing, I prefer to keep my setup as simple as possible. I mostly use these Apple plug-in things. Sometimes I use AirPods. We do also have our audio video producer, Sean here, has set us up with a really nice equipment for if we want to record from home. I've got some really nice stuff here. We have that all set up when we need to do that. But for the most part, I'm using the webcam. I'm using this. We'll use Zoom for videos most of the time. Sometimes we use Skype. It's mostly Basecamp and Zoom for us. And hardware-wise, I've seen some things. We've tried some stuff in the past where we have this. I forget what the name of the camera is. There's like a camera that shoots 360 degrees. We put it in a meeting room and you can see everyone. But it's like all the stuff is just, it's not really that important. And for example, when we were in the office, there's all sorts of technical like whiteboarding things that would record your whiteboard to some online thing. Just take a fucking picture of it and upload it. So whatever, like we don't need to make this a technical exercise. You probably have everything you need right now. If you have a laptop and you're watching this video, or a desktop computer and you're watching this video, or an iPad or an iPod or an Android, you have everything you need to work remotely. It's more of a question of software and the right methods and the right techniques to work together, but you have everything you need. Don't go out and just go spend them. I mean, we need to support the economy right now, but like you don't feel like I don't have enough to do what I need to do. You probably almost certainly do. David, you have a different technical setup than I do, but that's kind of my
it's not even that different. What I've come to realize is I like a computer that lives on a desk. So I don't use laptops that much anymore. I have a 27-inch iMac. Phenomenal machine. The longevity on those things is amazing. I work out of a couple of different places. In one place I have an iMac from 2013. Whenever the 5K screens first came out, I think it's 13. It's still wonderful. The longevity of an iMac is incredible. And you know what? The fucking keyboard works. For all the years I've used the iMac, the Apple Magic Keyboard 2 is the best keyboard I've ever used. I know there's a lot of programmers that use these tactile keyboards that really clackety-clack. What a great hobby. I'm almost envious I'm not into that because it's just cool. Like there's lights on some of them and you configure them yourself. But I don't. I use the just the standard Bluetooth keyboard, and it's great. And the iMac for me is useful because it helps me separate the work and the home. Like the computer where I have all my stuff set up on is in my office, and when I close my office door, I'm kind of away from that, right? I'm still on my phone perhaps or on an iPad or something, but it doesn't have all my stuff. and it's just good for separation. I think one thing, especially when you start working from home, if you just have one laptop and you use that laptop both for all your Netflix and you use it for all your work and have all your notifications, like when you're done with work is still sort of just piling in and it's piling on top of you. So you need a little more discipline, I think, if you do Jason's style, if you use your laptop after hours for home things.
Yeah, I should have mentioned, I tend to use an iPad like once I'm done with work. I've got the 11-inch whatever with the keyboard, and it's wonderful. The thing, this is actually a good way to bring it all home here, because when we first started this conversation 2 hours ago, we're talking about not trying to simulate the office when you're working remotely. This is not about setting up remote offices where everyone works the same way they used to. And some trend that I'm seeing that I've heard about, I talked to a journalist about this yesterday, and I mentioned this earlier in the show here, is this notion that companies are trying to actually, like, they're going to actually notch up on surveillance right now, which is, I want to know where everyone is all the time. I want to see everybody. I want to take a picture of everyone every 10 minutes to make sure they're at their desk. I want to turn on presence so everyone knows, like, is this person available or away, or a yellow dot or a red dot or a green dot? Because I don't trust anybody, and we have to see each other all the time, or things are going to fall apart and the whole thing. And I wonder, for the leaders out there who are able to make these decisions about technology and whatnot, I would really encourage you to not go that route. Do not implement things where you're watching people all day. Do not expect people to be available all the time. You don't want people to feel like they're being watched. You don't want people to feel like someone's looking over their shoulder, virtual or digital or physical. You're not going to get back to the culture thing, or to the best out of people. You're not going to get the best out of people if someone's like thinking they're looking over their shoulder all the time. And it's just, this stuff adds up, and it seems like it's cool. Like, oh, it's so cool to know where everyone is all the time and to see everybody's face and the whole thing. But it's really awkward, and it's especially awkward for people who are working at home, who might be working out of their bedroom because they don't have any other fucking space to work. And now the camera is shooting their family photos or the stuff on the bed or whatever, because they went to the bathroom and now their face doesn't cover up the screen. Like, this is a very uncomfortable thing to do and to require people to do. So I would pare back on that. Don't try and simulate the physical experience. Take advantage of the advantages of remote work, which means distance, time, space, attention, autonomy, trust. These are the things to invest in now. And when you get back to working in an office, perhaps, those things are going to pay off. Those are the things that are going to really pay off. So anyway, that's my sort of way to wrap up the tool talk and also the general talk. I don't know, Dave, if you have any final thoughts, but I feel like 2 hours is probably enough for people to deal with us.
Yeah, I think this is great. So we're going to talk about later in the week how we use Basecamp to work at Basecamp. So look out for that. The Rework podcast is currently taking a little bit of a break, but there's a long back catalog of great stuff where we talk a lot about these issues about culture and how we work and so forth. And then, of course, the remote book I heard is out of stock right now at Amazon. When I checked on indiebound.org, which pulls from independent booksellers, it's still in stock there, so you can buy it from there. The publisher is doing a second run, so it'll hopefully be in stock soon. And of course, there's always the digital version. You can buy it on Apple Books or Kindle.
By the way, the Rework podcast is at rework.fm if you want to find the podcast. You can also, of course, find it on wherever you listen to podcasts, but that's the website with all the show notes as well and that sort of thing. I think like video seems to be a pretty good format right now. Thanks for putting that up, Andy. So we might do some writing on SVN, or maybe working on some like a quick and dirty remote working guide and whatnot. But I think what David alluded to when I talked about earlier is we'd really like to do a session later in this week about how we work, actually showing you our Basecamp account and showing you where we make announcements, showing you how we break projects up, showing you how we set up teams. I was even thinking about starting a new account from scratch with a fictitious company in mind, and like, how would I set that up? So let us gather our thoughts on that, and then we'll tweet that out. Maybe we can do that Thursday or Friday or something this week. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can post them on Twitter. We'll try and get back to you if we can. And thanks for watching. This has also been recorded. So for those who wish someone else could have seen it, it'll be available for everybody to watch later. And thanks for sticking with us for 2 hours, especially the ones who stayed from the beginning all the way through the end. And I hope it was useful, and good luck to everybody, and stay safe and be smart.
And this
Yep.
is going to be recut and become a podcast on rework.fm. So if you subscribe to that, it's going to be like a hopefully nicely cleaned up version where Jason and I sound like geniuses without all our rambling. Maybe you can boil this down to 45 minutes. So they'll come out as soon as well. So thanks a bunch.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.